All right, hey Louis. Can you hear us, Louis?
I can now.
Okay. I can't hear you. His husband.
Is it through your laptop, his sound, or
No.
on the big screen?
It should be on there. Come on in. Ryan's good. All right. You want to sit? You can sit anywhere you want. All right. So the sound does not seem to be working on here now. Huh. But I guess that's all right. He'll just have to use the chat. All right, so we are at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many do we need for a quorum?
6 of them?
Okay,
It's five.
Okay.
I think it's 5. So we still have we'll give a couple minutes, I guess. It's 5:15. So
Oh, wow, that's so funny. It's delayed.
yes, we're not gonna.
I know, that's hilarious.
The YouTube piece is we're not gonna watch that. We're gonna watch the movie.
Lewis 6.
Well, yes and no.
Yes
Mariah's
and
not
no.
officially
Oh.
on yet. So I know Miss Downer is coming. She said she's going to be about 15 minutes late. FTE stuff.
Take care of that.
All right.
Monica's on.
Miss Howard. Okay, we got Miss Howard on. Monica's on. So that is us for sure. And then Sam. So we're certainly
we're
good to
good.
go. And I just sent out on Remind a new the live stream. There were some challenges, but I think we got it worked out. It's certainly working live. So hopefully people get that and have access, but of course it will hit record. And I am going to close this so I don't see that lag on YouTube.
I have a whole question for you.
Okay.
I see these discussion items. Who's gonna help lead the discussion?
Well, like I said, it's all me. I mean,
Okay,
discussion
gotcha.
items are all, I think it's the presentation, it's the
Yes.
grad rates.
Yes, that's all you.
It's
Okay.
all me. Yeah.
I got you.
I laugh at the Go Team agendas because
It's you.
basically
It's you.
they're pretty much
It's the Adam Dance himself.
led by the principal.
All day, every day.
It's the Adam Dance himself. So, okay. I'm just gonna really read the script word for word. Okay, all right.
So if somebody does come 15 minutes late, we still put them on the.
Yeah, she
roll,
can
just-
be added. Absolutely. Go to that for later. I think we got everything up we need. I had it all up on my computer, but now it's switched to this board as my computer, so. Perfect. I'm gonna hit record and then whenever you're ready, we can get rolling.
Okay. So I have to record if it's on YouTube?
Oh, I guess not,
Because the YouTube will
Channel.
stay, right?
but I guess I'll just do it
Just
Well, you
record.
can get the chat.
just for safety,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so I don't get fussed at by the Go Team office.
Ready? All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. There we go. Let's make sure the bodies are in the room. Welcome to the Maynard Jackson High School Go Team meeting, where we will follow our agenda as it has been emailed to everybody and publicly noticed. There are also copies on the table if you would like any. I'd like to remind everyone that this is a meeting of the Go Team. Only members of the Go Team may participate in the discussion. Any members of the public present are here to quietly observe. For members of the Go Team, please identify yourself when you speak. So I'm pleased to call this meeting of the Maynard Jackson High School Go Team to order at 5:18 p.m. Our first order of business is to call roll, and our secretary, Dr. King, will do that for us.
Okay, and I'll start with the roll. I'm Yusef King, secretary for the Go Team, here present.
John D. Harris, present. Suzanne Mitchell, present.
Sam, we're present.
Elena Blash, chair, present.
Adam Dancer, principal, present.
On Zoom,
Monica Howard, present.
Monica, can you try talking? We might just be having sound issues.
I am talking now.
Let's use the chat if that's possible, or if you want, you could always call a cell phone and we could, if you have something to say that's needed. But will the chat work?
yes.
Okay.
Great. So Louis Carty present and Monica Howard present via Zoom.
We do have a quorum.
Thank you. That was my next piece on the script. Is there a quorum?
Yes.
The answer is yes. So now that we have a quorum established, we will move on to our action items on our agenda. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. There were copies provided here and also electronically. As you review it, are there any changes to the agenda? No? I just have a question. Only because in the script, public comment is at the end, but on our agendas at the top. Does that order matter?
We generally do it at the start.
Okay,
It's been our practice for years. We can change that. So I'm not seeing any public, but if someone were to come on, we could always do it at the end.
okay. Oh, thank you for that.
And I'm trying to check on live stream too to make sure.
I was gonna say, they should have been, good. Or they would have to do Zoom.
Yeah.
YouTube, you just watch.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, seeing that there are no changes to the agenda, may I have a motion to approve our agenda?
Motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, and a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye. All right, any nays? Abstentions?
I can't hear her. Oh, he was talking about.
Oh, he says I
We
can
can't hear
hear.
each other on Zoom, but we can't.
Oh, he can hear, but we can't hear. Gotcha. Awesome, thank you. So our agenda has been approved for this evening. We'll now move on to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting. The minutes were provided electronically.
Yes.
Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? And if so, are there any corrections to the minutes? Okay, if there are no corrections, can I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Motion to approve meeting minutes.
Thank you. And the second? Sam, second.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sam.
That's Louis or Monica, can either of you speak now, see if I maybe fixed it?
Hello?
Speaking.
Hey.
We can hear you.
Fantastic.
Give him the big bear on the wall.
Awesome. All right, so we've had a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the previous meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Hi.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Great, thank you. So our meeting minutes from our last meeting have been approved. We do have one other action item for tonight, and that is to appoint and approve our second student representative. Miss Mariah Glenn. Yes, ma'am. I'll give Mariah a moment to introduce herself, and if Dr. Dancer wants to second her nomination. we will
Sure, I mean,
have a chat.
I'll start and then I'll let Mariah. So every year, so last year was the first year we had 2 representatives, and that students became active voting members of the Go team. One is voted by the student body, that's Sam, and the other is chosen by the principal. Generally, whoever's voted by the student body is, can be anybody, whoever they choose. I, in the past, have generally tried to find somebody, I find seniors, although I'm sure Sam will not be this case, is sometimes by January become a little bit disengaged, and try to find students who have an interest. I ask for faculty recommendations, I ask for counseling recommendations, and try to find different people who could add different voices to the Go team. So Mariah, I'm going to put you on the spot to introduce yourself, a little bit about yourself, your grade, and the types of things you're doing at Maynard Jackson, and why you agreed to come on to this, because she had some hesitancy. This is not her #1 comfort zone, but I think she's trying to work on that and figure out some leadership capabilities in that way. A little louder because it's hard to hear on the mic.
Okay, I said, hello, everyone. I'm Mariah. I'm a 11th grader at Maynard Jackson. I participate in the basketball team as well as the drill team. Right now, I'm about 3.7.
Yeah, so I think it's nice to have insight from, like she said, JROTC, as well as the athletics is a key piece that I don't know if we've had some athletics, there's some involvement, but just some different involvement from different people. And so we look forward to having her. So that's who I am bringing forth as our second Go team representative.
Thank you. It says we are appointing, not necessarily approving. So am I assuming that your decision is our?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
All right.
So we'll make note that Mariah Glenn is our second student representative on the Maynard Jackson High School Go team.
Yes.
So welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. And I also just to point out too, and if Mariah, correct me if I'm wrong, she's not IB, but takes AP courses. Again, I think voices, because we have so many different we have way more students who take AP courses at Maynard Jackson than we do IB courses. And I think that's a voice that's important for us to have at this table as well. So, okay.
All right. So now we'll move on to the Dr. Dancer show. Our discussion items on our agenda, discussion item 1 is strategic plan review, then the continuous improvement plan, and then a discussion about MAP data. And so Dr. Dancer is actually going to present that information, and we will have discussion about those items before we move on to the graduation conversation.
Okay, so I am going to share the screen. It's not what I actually want to share. Hopefully this is showing up. I'm just also looking to make sure it's coming up correctly on the live. Although it's okay, perfect. So this is a part of kind of meeting number 2. And as we prepare ourselves, well, first of all, hello, everyone. Hello on the screen as well. I hope you all are doing well. We had a weird fall break. It's been a few years since there was an extended time off in the fall. I think I'm not sure how I feel about it, but we'll see. We're almost like when they talk about year-round school, if you look at the rest of our school year, we basically are in like blocks of 5 to 6 weeks and then a week off, like except after spring break, it's a little longer, but then you have summer on your mind. So we're at that point of the year where there's blocks and then time off. So it'll be interesting to see. We are preparing as a Go team Budget season hits us in January. Prior to budget season, we need to look at our strategic plan and start identifying the priorities for strategic planning, which should inform how money is put into, how money is spent. As anybody who knows anything about school budgeting, if you've been on this Go team before, or if you're new to it, while the number will seem large, when you actually start calculating the primary thing that the money is primarily put towards salary. And so there's really not that much money that is left. And most of it is teachers. You have to have administrators, custodial crews, security. And then so when you get to the end, there's not all that much flex, but that is to make sure what we use with that flex is supporting our strategic plan. So that's where we're at. It's to support the guide. It's the guide for the work we're doing at the school. We're going to be monitoring the plan. And this is not me. I'm not taking credit for, or is that a full sentence or am I just reading it wrong? Okay, it's correct. By monitoring the plan and ranking priorities, we can all work toward the common goals. Using the priorities in the strategic plan, the school leadership team developed a CIP, formerly known as the School Improvement Plan. Now we call it the Continuous Improvement Plan. Same concept. We're going to review a little bit of that tonight. And this is kind of the guideline of where we were. In September through December, we're right here where we're looking at data, reviewing our strategic plan, and then prioritizing what are our top priorities. And then before winter break, so at the next meeting, we have one meeting before winter break, we should choose, rank our strategic plan priorities, which will then inform the budget season. The work prior to this, as you can see, I won't read everything to you. So this is where we are in this cycle. The current strategic plan, continuous improvement plan, and map data. That's what I'm going to focus on in this presentation, which is kind of a general guide that all Go teams are using. So as a reminder, this is our current strategic plan. This is available in that Go team Google folder that you all have access to. It's also accessible to the public, so feel free to share that link. It's open to the public. This was most recently approved January 26, 2022. So last year we made updates to it, a significant revamp in terms of the design, the layout, the look of the strategic plan. And so ultimately, again, I want to remind everybody on the Go team that school strategic priorities, that middle column, that's the column that this team has say in, so to speak. The one on the right is based on what the Go team prioritizes, is what the leadership team, instructional leadership team, the work at the school level. And so just keeping that in mind, it's not just designing these, it's prioritizing which of these are the priorities. If you look, last year, I think we looked at the ones in bold still might have been the ones that we chose as kind of priorities last year. As I tell anybody though, there's these priorities and many more. There's so much in consideration. This document is not all encompassing, but that's where we're at. Any questions on the strategic plan? I think that the homework piece is going to be based on data and questions that you have, is to start thinking about which of these items we want to rank as the highest priorities in terms of budgeting. All right, and that is the key thing between now and the next meeting that you want to come prepared, because it'd be really nice, and I think would also save us a lot of time in these meetings in January when there's these long budget presentations, if we come to the table with the items ranked at the end of December, and then way we're hitting the ground running in January. The only other thing I want to put on the table, and obviously you as a Go team have say in this as well, is whether or not there needs to be any updates to the strategic plan. That's a conversation. I think something came up about that at the last meeting. I don't have the minutes in front of me to remember, but that's something that can be considered. If that's something when we talk about the agenda for the next meeting, we may want to bring that to the table. So if there's something here that needs to be updated. What I will say there is, remember, we are in 2022 going into 2023. This strategic plan was most recently updated last year. Strategic plans are not designed necessarily to be accomplished within a singular year or calendar year. So sometimes time is necessary, but sometimes there's things that we wish we could improve or tweak or whatnot. So I'm going to let you all, any questions there?
Just a quick question. Remind me the name of the folder that you shared with us. I'm trying to.
It's just Go Team.
Okay, it's just good.
Go Team. I think it's Go Team, MJHS Go Team, I believe.
Thank you.
And I can share that link again if needed.
No,
But it's Go Team _ MJHS. All right. I'm going to move forward then. So the continuous improvement plan is designed each year, really starting at the end of the last school year into the summer into this year. Work with the leadership team, instructional leadership team. It's a lot of the summer work we do as a district. And generally, you're talking about up until the, it's the guides the work of the school, what should be our priorities. And we finally, for the first time, had some data, first time in a few years, had some, milestone data to start looking at and diving into. Although it's, as I shared last time when we reviewed that data, it was baseline data for the 2022 milestones. And we do a needs assessment, as you can see on this document. I'm not going to read everything. We look at strengths and opportunities and challenges. I will highlight a couple things, things that I highlighted last year or at the last meeting. Our proficiency rate in algebra, while it was steady, we didn't lose as much as we thought we would after the pandemic. And we had a very significant, greater than 7-point increase in grad rate from 2020 to 2021. One of the things that I believe is data points are important, but year to year things, you have to be careful about over celebrating any one jump or year. It's good to do that, but it's sustaining it over time is critical. And that's really what we're trying to push for. Opportunities and challenges. I've been very forthcoming about our suspension rate last year. We had a lot of issues last year. And 0.63 marked 2019. That's suspension days for all students in the school. Like if you took all the students, how many suspension days would they have if every student had a suspension day? If that makes any sense. Most kids don't have any suspension days. It's just spreading it out. That's the metric that we use. And we saw a big increase in 2022 compared to our last benchmark, which was 2019. Remember, 2020 and 2021 were very low because we didn't really have kids at the school. There wasn't any suspension. And in 2020, basically all the data was almost wiped out. I don't say wiped out, but was disregarded in many ways because we shut down in March. That 0.63 marked a low for us ever at Jackson in 2019. It was something we were proud of. We had made a lot of improvements on alternatives to suspension. In particular, that's reducing things like fights and disruptive events, which are the cause of most of our suspension days. And so these were the opportunities and challenges. We did a tried to identify overarching needs, which you can see in the literacy realm. There is a focus on how do we notice in the data students struggling with informational text and numeracy. They're looking at the standards of mathematical practices, and these particular areas in those standards are struggles that might be leading to some of the data. And then ways that we can reduce suspension. So, and then we kind of do a 5 whys, like why?
Dr. Dancer,
Yes.
can you go back real quick?
Mm-hmm.
What is the take rate? What is that? The number of students
Oh.
taking a survey, or what is it?
Sure. Take rate. So thank
The
you.
second one down.
It's attendance. So attendance take rate is, there's lots of lists that are created of things that have to be due. It's like a compliance thing. So one of the requirements of any teacher is to do attendance. But in particular in high schools, you see this, and some in middles, but high schools, because you're talking about 4 and sometimes 5 attendances a day, making sure that teachers are taking them each period, because it's a CCRPI indicator. There are some challenges associated, especially last year was challenging because we had so many substitutes on a daily basis with COVID. I mean, 14 to 19 substitutes a day, when sometimes no substitutes, attendance, absences with some clerks who were over attendance. There were some challenges there. So just looking at that accountability, which, because CCRPI attendance is there. So we went to and identified basically some overarching needs. And then there are SMART goals that we're working for that are inside of our continuous improvement plan. Now, I will say these SMART goals are basically somewhat required. So while we drafted them in large, the focus of them is because this is what we have to focus on as a high school within this district. Which I understand, because this is where CCRPI is going to come from in large part. So there had to be a literacy goal, a numeracy goal, then a whole child goal, which we'll talk about. So these are the 3 of our 5 goals as a high school. We're so lucky we get to have 5 instead of 3. So by the end of 2022-23 school year, we're looking to increase the percentage of students scoring proficient and above on American literature milestone by 3% from where we were. As I shared last time, American literature was a big concern in our 2022 milestone data. We're not happy with it, and that was a big focal point it's a big focal point for us. Similar goal for numeracy, except it's 3% in algebra 1. And this is an actual 3 percentage point increase. So if we were at 20% proficient, we're trying to get to 23% proficient. When you look at it as a CCRPI metric, it becomes a little different in how they calculate things. So we try to use something that's publicly facing and easy to see if we hit or not. Additionally, by the end of for whole child, to reducing serious behavior incidences, we're trying to reduce our overall student suspension rate. We're not trying to go from 1.22 to 0.63 in 1 year. That's a big jump. We're still dealing with impacts of the pandemic within our society, which I think has impacted student behavior. But to have a pretty significant decrease, 1.22 to 1.10 was found in APS Graph's behavior dashboard. That is not a publicly facing dashboard because it does have student data, but I'm always happy to share where we're at. And we're actually kind of a little bit below 1.1 right now. We're at about 1.05. So we're hoping we can maintain that momentum and even lower it more throughout this year. Compared to where we were last year, that is a drop. So that's good. So fewer suspension days. And while there have been disruptive events and fights, at least to this date, knock on wood, we are much fewer than we were at the same point last year. So that is where we're at. Again, I knock on wood because each and every day is a new day. As far as other goals, we have to have as a high school graduation goal. When we wrote this goal, that was our current graduation rate because we did not have the new rate. I have had the new rate for a long time. I'm very good at calculating the exact percentage every single time. I was 0.1 off this year. I was never able to share it, but we are at 88.7, which I'll touch at in a little later. But our goal is to break 90% in the 4-year graduation rate. I'm not allowed to talk about 5-year graduation rate yet until that data is unembargoed, but I do know that. And again, I think that's also an important metric because that shows that we're still working with our children and getting them across the stage. And I'm very proud of the work that we continue to do with the 5-year students in collaboration with Phoenix. Now, this goal on the right, and it's intentionally blank. This is a goal that we are required to have. It's related to career readiness, college and career readiness levels. And that is measured through all of these different calculations that involve the number of students who get a qualifying score on an AP test, 3, 4, or 5, an IB exam, 4, 5, 6, or 7, those who earn dual credits, their ACT or SAT performance, as well as EOPAs, and those who successfully complete a 3-year CTAE pathway and successfully pass the EOPA, the end of pathway assessment. This is a lagging indicator. We don't get this number. We'll get this number, I guess, in November when the very watered down CCRPI information comes out, because it will only basically be content mastery, graduation, and a couple of other little things. No progress, no closing the gaps, nothing like that. But I just got, because we've been saying this is not a goal that's really workable because we don't have the number yet, that we can specify something that's going to work better for us. For in our case, what we're looking at is how can we specifically, since it's our signature program, increase the percentage of students who are scoring at the at a qualifying score on IB assessments, so that we just kind of got permission to change that. So we have something to work towards more tangibly. So that's not reflected here because it's kind of just been approved. And this has been an ongoing challenge for this continuous improvement plan. However, we still work for it because it's still ACT and SAT prep. For example, the PSAT is next week. That's an important assessment for students to take because it helps prepare them for the SAT. And we have the SAT and ACT school days both happening in March, back-to-back weeks. Fantastic. I know, Ms. Harris, the instructional time lost is staggering, but it's awesome. So we don't know how to balance the two, but that's where we're at. These are just some progress monitoring measures built within our community CIP. I'm not going to read them to you. I'll give you, how about if I give you a couple minutes, just read them to yourselves. If you have any questions, I'll take them.
I have a question about the SMART goals.
And Lewis and Monica, I don't know how to I never have chat up. Maybe I can get it up. All right, there we go. Sorry. So Lewis had to add something in, so I apologize. It might be outdated comment, Lewis. Go ahead. SMART goal question?
Yeah, just because I remember on the strategic plan, there was something about equity with APIB, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not included anywhere in the SMART goals, or what was that not one of the top priorities yet?
Yeah, not in the CIP. As far as enrollment in those classes, that's more embedded within the work of our strategic plan.
Okay.
But in terms of the continuous improvement plan, that was one of our areas to grow, but it's not necessarily the 5 goals I showed you are the 5 goals we have to have.
Let me ask you that. The school administration puts together the CIP?
Well, like the leadership team. So that
Leadership,
includes,
right, leadership team. And then is it reviewed by the district?
Yes.
Okay, and then it comes back to you and they say, yes, this is what you're doing. Okay.
In fact, we just did a quarterly review, and that's the part of what we're doing here. So these quarterly reviews, these progress monitoring measures, we just had to do a quarterly review. And basically we haven't completed any of these yet. These are all in progress. And as I say, that it's all in progress. So if you look at if you have any specific questions about a bullet, like expecting teachers use dedicated planning time and PLCs to create inquiry-based units. So it's the development in their professional learning communities that they're working to develop inquiry-based ELA units that are going to help meet the standards of what we need on the American literature, engage students, and all of that. Also, in terms of vertical teaming and literacy, why this is so important is that the ELA standards are basically the same year after year after year. It's just what they're doing in the classes that changes. And so what we need to be working towards is a progression, students progressing from 9th to 10th, 10th to 11th. So by the time they hit 11th grade, they've hit certain benchmarks. They know how to do certain styles of writing. They know how to approach certain literary styles of reading and how to address that. Versus, and this is where a testing culture, I think, hurts us sometimes. What we saw for years is 9th grade lit, a lot of emphasis because it had a test also. 10th grade, no test. You know, not saying the teachers weren't teaching, but maybe it's a different focal point. It's just, and then they hit American lit in 11th grade and there's gaps. So the challenge to the ELA team, I look at Ms. Harris because she's the department head of that, is how do we work towards building, and this is vertical, like what do we want every 9th grader to be able to do by the end of their 9th grade year, 10th grade year, 11th grade year, minimally. And then you're not reinventing the wheel and reteaching every year, you're just building on their toolbox. And that's a unique opportunity in this particular area because there's similarity in the standards year to year versus others where algebra and geometry have very different standards, although there's different mathematical practices on how to approach the content. And that's utilizing, that's part of what's here. So let me see in the chat. Briefly last month, we spoke about focus somehow on helping students learn how to study better for tests. Yes. Yeah, don't disagree there. That's a big focus department. That's been the push I've been put to our department heads to lead is study skills. How do we teach our children to study better or at all?
So the extra money, if there, whatever's left,
Mhm.
and we're gonna build a priority list based on the CIP or based on the strategic plan? Or a
Informed by the
combination?
CIP, but based on the strategic plan. The strategic plan is what guides. This is just a data point, just like the map data, just like the graduation. Yeah.
And then this ends up kind of being your touch point with your with the teachers,
Mhm.
their roadmap to how they're teaching and
Yeah.
building out curriculum and all of that.
Right.
And so then you can go back and say, okay, yes, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. So we should ideally see these results.
Right. You know,
Is
the
the
problem with the CIP and why it's a little narrow, it's narrowed is because it's clearly a big focus in literacy and numeracy. And of course, literacy does play a role in other subjects. I'm not negating that, but you know, the goal is American Lit and algebra, you know, and which is great, but most of our students aren't in those classes. They're in other classes. And so actually the strategic plan in itself touches more students because you're talking about advanced placement, you're talking about IB, you're talking about ESOL, you're talking about special education, much, you know, more, it's broader in many ways than this. So.
But back in the day, the school improvement plan was what was used to allocate Title I dollars, correct?
Yes, it had to, when you spent Title $1, it had to connect align to the school improvement plan. Now, because of Fund 150, all of the money is in one bucket.
Okay.
And it still needs to align in some way, but it's not the same method anymore because everything's kind of merged into a bucket. So there's a little more flexibility, but there's also not some flexibility. So like in literacy, like we do not have the option to say we want to bring in a particular reading intervention program because the district requires us to use Read 180 and
Right.
math. Those are not things that we can change. Even if the budgeting, now we could potentially try to add something else, but I think that just adds a conflict when we have to focus on certain things. So. Questions, Louis, Monica?
I have two others, sorry.
Okay.
One is, what students take the ACT and what students take the SAT?
School day, you mean?
Yeah, in March. Who takes what?
It's
Or
just juniors.
They take both?
Yes. So last year was the first time the ACT school during the school day was offered. We've done the SAT the last several years, the last 3
Required,
years.
you say?
We basically require it. Obviously, if a parent complains and says, no, my child's not taking it, but and it impacts the numbers, by the way, when you make when everybody tests, your numbers are not going to be, versus just the students who want to or have the desire to, your numbers could look higher. But I think that it's also an equity situation and
Sure.
access when you look at who chooses to take the ACT and SAT and who does not. And so that's why it's during this day is actually, it's great. I wish they weren't back-to-back weeks because it's a massive undertaking, just like PSAT next week. Tuesday is basically, for all intents and purposes, shot, right? If you're not, because there's no way for us to not shut down the school just for testing. And similarly, it's hard even when it's just SAT and ACT in one grade level because of the number of proctors you need in the building to cover. It's switching classes, maintaining that type of a school. We're looking at options, maybe going old school, like lining up desks in the gym and just getting a whole bunch of people because it's paper and pencil versus computer. So we're looking at some options there so we could at least continue with school, considering that milestone exams are, there's spring break and then milestone exams 2 weeks later.
And then quick question, the cost of the exam students are paying or?
No. So the only, during the day are paid by the district. PSAT, the district pays for all 10th and 11th graders. 9th graders had the option to sign up. And
Last month, we had, just going back to the strategic plan,
Mhm.
we had talked about possibly 2 data points to consider. And one was about technical school or at least including that. What maybe I think we should do, and you tell me your thoughts, that we should all go back and read it and look at it, and then anything that maybe we want to, I think you talked about, did you talk about it? About the technical school piece and adding that in?
I think I was talking about entrepreneurship and
Entrepreneurship,
internship opportunities.
Right, so, and I don't know, I know we're not looking to open it back up, but if there can be a few additions,
Mhm.
that maybe anybody who has anything can bring it with them to the next meeting, and then we could just look at that again. If there is anything, and if everyone's good, once they read it again, then we're good and we move on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to it. I think tweaks, every year we've done this, there've been a couple like additions or
word,
something.
right.
I mean, Dr. King, he served on the Go team, and you know this, it's a revamp versus kind of a few revisions is
Right.
much easier.
Mhm.
And honestly,
I think we had it. in that-
so much of this falls, you can make almost anything fall under many of these things here. They're written, I think, purposely general
keep it
to
open.
allow for openness. So, but we'll definitely, can we make note
Yeah, I had
that
that
as
on
an
my
agenda
agenda.
item?
Mhm.
Okay.
Maybe put it in the minutes,
Mhm.
folks read it to bring anything back. And then let me ask you the last thing, something like, you talked about equity with testing, which I think is really critical for SAT and ACT. Are we in a position that we could use any of that money or funding if this becomes a priority by the group to allow for study skills, test taking skills, something that's more organized and available to everybody, whether it be after school or whether it be, something that kids could actually plug into, or teachers could even refer them into, that we could look at, not looking for the teachers to do it.
Right.
Or is that too like granular and not really our role, I guess?
I think in terms of like, if the goal is something in the priorities about ensuring there's preparation for these types of programs, then it's
To help increase.
to help increase the
Proficiency, yeah.
in proficiency as well as performance in ACT, SAT, then I would say that one of the things that can, it's maybe money allocated towards whether it's contracted services or, and finding the right service for that. The problem has been is for years we had like Emory tutors here and doing SAT prep and ACT prep, and the pandemic impacted that. We're trying to get them back. It was the regular attendance of our students to those opportunities, especially after school. And not because they didn't want it, it's because they're conflicted. They have sports, they have Model UN, they have after school jobs, and it's prioritizing. And so that was a challenge that actually the Emory tutors would say they saw at a lot of schools. And also it's it's these online prep programs like Khan Academy and other things that people feel like they can get access to and work on their own. Now, again, I think there are some children who do that, but many
I think
do
the ones
not.
that we need to be reaching.
And
at.
so that's, that's easier said than done, because it's much more fun to be on TikTok than it is to do that SAT prep. So.
Well, and I'm
Okay,
also
that's
talking
awesome.
also overall study skills, not just for SAT and ACT.
Okay.
The ability that I'll just give you a perfect example. One of my children came into school and they had been in virtual and they forgot how to study, and I didn't realize it until a teacher identified it and got me on the phone, and then we both jumped in and got her where she needed to be.
Right.
But, that's a whole lot of ifs, right? And so, and extra work on the teachers.
No, I agree.
And so I'm just thinking, what can we, if there's anything that we can allocate resources to where teachers can refer out, advisory, part of it, but I don't know, I'm just brainstorming, which I'm not really attempting to do, but I just want us thinking about that.
Okay, I agree.
If that's a good use of resources.
Yeah, and we could definitely make that happen. And I know actually our parent liaison is looking at and communities and schools. I want them to do some kind of family engagement workshop. So they're working on something where there's a few different choices for parents in a thing on different topics. One of which would be like study skills for their children, because one of the things is if you go, we can't assume a lot of parents know how to study too, because it's been many years since we've been in school, whether or not we were good at it, even when we were in school, whatever it may be. What it looks like now that it's not a textbook that you highlight, because most of this stuff is on a computer. It looks very different now. So.
Had a couple comments there too. I'm not sure if you saw about the technical entrepreneurship. Just pointing it out.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think sounds like the next time we have a potential discussion item to bring to the table of how we can tweak it, or if it's covered in there. All right. Map data. Just going to go through this, not take too long unless you have a lot of questions, because I think it's good information, but it's also just a baseline. So as you go through and you look at data, a couple things you may want to ask yourself is, what do you notice about the data? What are your wonderings, and what additional questions you have? Bring those up ahead of time, just so as you're looking through them, that's how you can approach data. First off, the map, as you know, is new to APS as a whole district last year. MAP is a well-established a suite of assessments in that regard. And, but now all 9th through 12th graders have to take it 3 times a year. The relevancy of this, and this is kind of just a short breakdown of some of the relevancy in terms of specific things it helps us look at from each grade level. And also in preparation, so you can see SAT and ACT, because the better you do on these assessments, at the higher quintiles you score, the more prepared you are for success on those. Georgia milestones, and so on and so forth. And 12th grade, there is some conversation about the benefit, especially after the fall administration, of taking the MAP for 12th graders, because in some ways, I don't think they're actually putting any effort into it, and they're focused on other things, but it's new. So we're having conversations about that as a district, whether maybe the fall administration is the last administration for the seniors. And then we certainly in the spring, it impacts our data. So we'll see. But so we took it in the fall. What you're looking at here, and I'm not going to take too long here, but this is reading. Okay, so this is the reading section. And ultimately, you see there's quintiles of performance. So on the scale scores. And the best way to break this down in ways that I think is relevant for us here is that if you're in the green and blue, these are the higher quintiles. You are more towards proficient if you were to take some type of standardized test. Now, it's not a perfect breakdown, but it's pretty good. If you're in the, so if your green is more proficient, blue would be more distinguished if you're thinking milestones. The orange and the yellow would be more in that developing range, and then the red more of the beginner. And what's important to look at here is what we use this data for is obviously seeing students who are in the red. These are students who may need support in some type of a reading program like Read 180, or may need some other supports if they're unable to have Read 180 in their particular course, might need some additional supports within their courses on how to address, reading and writing in particular in those classes. The class of 2024 is the group that takes the milestone in American literature. To some extent, not all of them do, because if they're an IB, they probably took it last year and they're not taking it this year. So there are some class of 2025 kids in AP language who will take the American literature milestone. We break it down to the specific areas that the map measures. Again, this is not used for a grade or anything like this. This is to inform students where they're at. All right. Quintile overview, vocabulary acquisition and use, informational text and literature.
The chat.
Oh yeah, sorry.
So I did have one question.
Mhm.
So if a 10th grader taking AP language takes the milestones that year, and let's say they go into year 1 of IB literature, when they offer in that class,
They don't take the milestone.
They don't take one IB literature at all. Okay.
Dr. Latchman's already looking at that list, so those students will be informed so that they know who's taking it and who's not in
Oh.
IB. Last year, remember, because we didn't have the milestone the year before,
Right.
they had to take it.
Right.
So, so that's where we're at there. Math, same thing. This cut score is a little bit more precise because when I said it's general, like distinguished, proficient, developing, and beginner. In math, as they are also in elementary and middle school and with the GMAS test there is more data in which the MAP, the NWEA group has basically taken a particular scale score and identified where it would fall with the Georgia milestone in algebra. And so this would be the scale score in MAP that would correlate to this would be the RIT score in MAP that would correlate to the scale score and where it would fall in the Georgia milestone. So when we look at that data, we're really trying to determine, in particular, that winter data. And we have the ability to take this data and not just do it by cohort, but do it for class. So we can see who in each class is scoring where, and what their predicted performance on the milestone would be. So in mathematics, as you can see, not shockingly, this is where we're at. This does not show growth. That growth is not here. And that's really what MAP is about. It's about where you are as an individual and your growth. Are you demonstrating growth? So when you took it in the fall, are you growing from where you are when you take it in the winter and the spring? And then for some students, although a couple of our charter schools, ANCS being one, students have been taking MAP for many years, but the systems don't connect right now. So we can't see their ANCS performance over time. But when you look at that from elementary, what we will be able to now in APS, so like we'll get the King data, we'll see how they performed, and you can see that hopefully that progression of growth over time, which is important because sometimes students who score in the beginning and developing level, it can become discouraging because you feel like you failed, you're in the red. But when you dive into that data, you see, well, but where you started and where you ended up, you had more growth than somebody who was distinguished. Like you grew more this year than they did. And that's important data to build confidence in students and parents and teachers, honestly, that they are making a difference. So our big challenge with mathematics, and these are the areas on MAP that are touched on, and you could see the performance there. It bodes well, hopefully, that operations and algebraic thinking is one of our higher in terms of proficiency, for sure, because that's the 9th grade assessment. Now, the question becomes, and Mariah, I would like to ask you, or Sam, when you guys are taking the MAP tests, do you take them seriously? And sometimes you might have missed them because you're out or whatnot. Like, as a high school student, how do you feel about it?
Me personally, I like taking every test seriously. This is like a time, like a workout time. Then I have to get to the side where I like to have work done and then work.
Do you look at the data, and have you looked at the data that you've gotten and said, oh, saw your growth, or looked at that report that you received?
Not recently.
Not recently. Sam?
I mean, it depends on what you mean by seriously. Like I take it serious enough that I don't look terrible, but it's not like I'm taking it like the SAT. Like if there's a question that's like really hard, I'll be like, okay, whatever, it's gonna be B and move on. But if it's like C, yeah, like I take it moderately seriously.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
I think the class, when you administer in classrooms, like versus an advisory, I think that also makes a difference based on like the teacher report might determine how serious the students take it. If they don't care about advisory, they may not take it seriously. So I think there are a lot of factors to think about with the test results even that you get, because it depends on like where they took it, who they took it with. Some students do better if they're in class versus in advisory versus in a gym or, whatever. So.
And we're bound a little bit by some requirements. The requirement this year, our plan was to do it in the classrooms because MAP in and of itself is not supposed to have to be finished in one sitting, but our guidelines were it had to be finished in one sitting, which meant that in order to guarantee, it's also it's not timed, so students can progress at their pace, and some may take longer. So if you can't guarantee they're going to finish it, say in Ms. Harris's class, then what do we do? And so we have to do like testing, and we'll have to do the same in the winter. And the environment was better. Actually, I think in terms of participation rate, it was the highest we had. And so that was good. But we have to figure out getting students to embrace growth That's what we're hoping for. So, and if you were to compare this, and I don't have that data tonight, but like where do we compare in this map growth to other schools in the district? It's very similar to what we look like in milestones, where like you have like North Atlanta, Midtown, Kip Collegiate, early college, depending on the subject, and then us. Like it's the similar pattern in this as it is in.
We're the bellwether, actually,
So,
in the district.
yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Do we also will we have the map data for Rise and ninth graders for King now? Like as those students come up, do we already have access or will we have?
Yeah, you
access?
can look at that up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's all available.
And I know with scheduling and stuff.
So that's all available. Oh, for the ninth graders.
Better.
Oh, you mean the eighth graders?
Right.
Oh, I don't know about that, but we could probably get that.
Yeah, okay. That'd be-
Because the counselors definitely, because this informs whether or not you're like in a math support class
Right.
or read 180. There's some requirements there.
Can I just ask them 2 questions? Do you all ask to see your math scores? Do you care? So you all open them and look at them, or you just give them to your parents? Check with them.
Do y'all do the teachers like discuss it with y'all? Because I remember, last year when we had to pass out math scores, and I used to pass out a lot of the students that understand what they was looking at. And as a teacher, I kind of explained like, okay, this is what RTI like stand for. This is what it means. This is where you at. These are some areas that you can grow. Like, so do teachers discuss that with y'all, or they just give it to y'all?
It's not discussing that. It's like, but I got my orchestra and no one really paid attention to it. And trying to ask, like, we do understand religion, and most people didn't understand religion.
There's other classes that teach you. Some of the classes, like some of the IB classes, like they expect the students to be like nerds when it comes to like standardized testing because they take like so many tests. But like, I don't know, it really just depends on the teacher. If they feel like they have class time to talk about it.
I think as you take the test more, you won't need to do that every single time, right? Because you've taken it for 3 years, let's say. So I think that will probably decrease over time, like ninth grade, if, or maybe a new student, but as they've taken it year after year after year, they may not necessarily use that overview of it. Yeah. I guess this is year 2 about,
I we need to do a better job of communicating about what it means. But then again, sometimes at the high school level, parents, if you hear like learn more about math assessments and what that means, there's so many tests that parents have questions about. It's like SAT, ACT, what is PSAT, college admissions. It's like, what is your priority?
Right.
And does math fit there? But it's figuring out how do we merge them all together into how math can inform how you're doing on these. And if you're demonstrating growth in literacy, it's going to impact you most likely in your performance on the SAT and ACT. And you're not studying for math. It's really, it's kind of, are you progressing in those areas, which is really I think
that's
the work,
the discussion.
it's the
How do
work
we
of what
use
you're
it?
doing.
How do we use them as a tool to inform and help where kids need help versus a test?
So that's on the map front. The next steps, and I'm sorry, I'll look up, I don't know if Lewis had a chat or if Monica had something. Okay. Where we're going next, I'm sorry, this is a little bit, I almost wish there was a separate screen just for the chat. At our next meeting, we will discuss our data, how our data is aligning to our strategic plan and determine if we need to make adjustments. And this is kind of a stock slide here, as you can see, because I wouldn't have chosen CSK. It's a great picture. It's fantastic. But before the end of the fall semester, we need to take action. So we need to vote on ranking our strategic priorities. So that's why it's important that you know what they are and if there's any other questions or things that you want to see on that agenda, chair, vice chair, definitely let them know. What I will say is if we can have the communication going about possible little tweaks or revisions to the strategic plan prior,
Yes.
that we could almost have a discussion and action within the same meeting, that would be helpful so that we can end that meeting in November with a ranking of our priorities. Because again, the budget season comes and there's certain slides I have to hit there, like I have to go through and want to make sure. And budgeting, we'll see how it goes, you know, with our title status, with the money from CARES Act, all of that stuff. As I mentioned last time, we were slightly below projections, although we've gone up since then. So it just is what it is. We'll see where we fall.
And when you say priorities, are we saying specific priorities, or are we saying fostering academic excellence for all is number one, then number two, or are we going into?
The specific ones.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're
These.
using the
No.
same, right? No, I know, but what if there's something? It's not necessarily the whole thing, it might be something in that, or are you
Right.
looking for us to rank each of those?
So think of like these as a bullet point. So, you know, what, and the way we've done it in the past that seemed to have worked is basically prioritizing almost one within each bucket. And
Okay.
again, what I will say is this, is that when we go through budgeting, and it naturally happens, is that all of them get touched because that's the
Sure.
requirement. But if there's something, 2 years ago, this one, implementing a long-term structural plan to deal with the ongoing COVID impact was important because we knew we were coming out of we were coming back to in school. Did we have the supports and structures in place? That's what brought on like us looking at the restorative practices coach, things like that, because which has been very good and helpful in a lot of ways. So those types of things, it may be, we want to look here more towards, you know, the teaching versus that. But again,
Would this be?
they're all important. If you really get down to it, it's all
Wow.
critical.
Well, would this be an opportunity or should we, or do we need like a Go Team working session where we just talk about that before we come back to the larger meeting?
It may be beneficial for those who are interested, if there's any tweaks to it, to propose, to work through it. Like if we're changing any language here. Like I said, it's been less than a year since it's been updated. So I don't know how many, if any are needed. But that may be worth it.
I can't imagine that there would be any major changes other than maybe an addition here or there, but my question is, how many priorities are realistic in your mind? Like, what's that number? Is it 3? Is it 5? Is it?
There's actually a number that we have to, I think it's 3. I think it's 3 that we have to identify as a Go Team,
Okay,
but I haven't seen the budget format yet. I think it's 3 if I recall.
okay.
I think it's 3.
And then I know you have a ton in your head
Yeah.
that you know. So when we're, you know, if we come back around to some discussion around, you know, for example, the restorative coach, that's been an answer to climate and culture
Mhm.
and kind of getting the best out of kids who are having challenges. Can you share with us kind of those things that you're doing? So then if we kind of have a list, we can say, okay, this feels like it's being managed now.
Right.
But maybe we move that to 3 or
Right.
5 or 7.
Yeah.
So I would just keep that in mind, particularly around the space, at least for me, around behavior, support. That's one side, but then the other side is, and I think we talked about it last time, is the discipline piece. Not, I'm very curious to find out what the district is doing to support us from that perspective, really to have a better purview of what's going on in that whole space. I know they have new people and there's a new department and,
Right.
you know, but
It's
how is
been
that
restructured.
impacting the school?
Right.
And if you have kids who are in school who, you know, need a new opportunity, you know, how are we impacting that? And how do we get to that? And so that's, you know, that's some of the things that if, and I don't know if we can, as a Go team, do anything about that, but I would love to have some purview on that whole culture, and I call it culture and climate.
Right.
That's really important for me. And that goes into equity and everything else. So. That's all I got.
Lewis mentioned discussing tweaks to strategic priorities first and then prioritizing second. Yeah, I think that makes the sense. So I'll leave it up to the chairs. If you
We'll
want
do
to
that.
call a work session or something, I'm fine with that. I don't even know if I have to necessarily be a part of it
No, you
necessarily.
I think if
So,
we're
under, we just need to, I think,
notice it,
then there'd be no action. Yeah, I don't even believe you need to have a quorum because
I was gonna say, yeah, do we have to notice it if there isn't a quorum?
I don't know.
Not
We
by-
could look into the bylaws.
Not by,
Yeah.
sunshine laws you don't. I don't know if by the bylaws we do.
All right.
There is, you do have to notice if it's gonna.
If there is a quorum, then it has to be noticed.
If there isn't a quorum, so it does not have to be noticed. So if there were two people meeting.
If there, yeah.
There's a form that has to be noticed. Okay. Okay, so all right, so are we saying that we want to have a work session? And then who would be interested in attending that work session? And then we would need to obviously set a date.
Can we just do it over Zoom?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Louis.
Susan. Ms. Howard.
Monica, did you say yes?
Yeah, Monica. The strategic. Discussing any specific. I probably really just
So you
additions. I
making a
don't think
list
there's
of the
anything.
attendees who will go? I mean, depending on when it
Take
is, I can jump in just to
But
kind
more
of
clip, maybe
add
some
some
more.
insight
clarity.
or whatever, depending on the time everybody chooses, you know.
Okay.
So we tentatively down, I guess.
Do we need to decide on the date and time right now?
Mhm.
All right,
Hold on, I'm pulling up the calendar. When's our next Go team meeting?
November 15th.
Okay, so let's put the pressure.
And so our goal is to rank our priorities before winter break. But the next meeting, we want to at least update the plan. Is that the goal?
I mean,
Having edits,
I think if
Right.
there's
tiny edits.
edits and then ideally approve it so that it can be
Yes.
ranked
Before winter break?
before that, yes.
Okay, so then that means we need to meet between now and November 15th. Got it. I'm just trying to get the time.
So we will edit and rank at the November 15th meeting, correct?
Yes, that would be that. That's the ideal. That's been challenging in the past. But
Yeah, we're gonna do it.
that's the ideal.
We're gonna do it that way.
So it would be,
That's what I,
So y'all want to meet beforehand, before the 15th? just to kind of
yes,
go
the
over
week
it
of the
again?
7th.
Oh, the 7th, okay.
Of November, I'm not in town.
The 30th, the 31st. That's in 2 weeks.
Halloween.
Not on the 31st. Unless you're coming dressed up.
some school districts gave kids off the day after Halloween.
Why?
I heard Decatur did that. The
What?
professional learning day this day.
Yeah, that's a very Decatur thing to do.
It's becoming like, what is this about? What is happening?
That's very,
Someone said, how about November 2nd?
okay. Hold on. Yeah, I'm good. November 2nd.
Is Wi-Fi in the strategic plan? I just want to know.
Well, our Wi-Fi should be good.
Should we, do we have to, do you all have to set up the Zoom for us? Or can I set up the Zoom and then just give you the,
I think you could set it.
Yeah.
and then just provide you the information so you can.
Right.
If there's more than,
Can we do it on the 3rd,
um,
November 3rd?
Someone said no.
Monica said wait first would be better.
That's my anniversary.
she's saying the first.
The 3rd works too. Louis, are you good with the 3rd,
I'm
November
fine with
3rd?
the third. Well, then we don't have to notice.
3rd
it.
not
It's
good
just-
for Louis. I can do the 1st. Dr. King wanted to attend, but he cannot.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, you can't come, because you're gonna throw us into a forum.
Which I'm old 5, like 6 people. I don't have to. I'm just, it's cool.
No, you can't come.
Yeah, but any day, it's fine, whatever y'all decide. I mean, if I may not be able to make it, or,
The 10th is my other day I can do.
That's
It's a Thursday, November 10th. Monica or Louis, does the 10th work? Oh, Lord, I can't
Something
remember.
like that.
Thank you for remembering
No, I
that
can
for
do the
us.
10th.
It is.
I don't know if you guys can hear me. We were having problems.
I can see your chat.
We can hear you now.
We can hear you.
It's on the calendar. That's the only reason I said that. It's on the school calendar.
The Jackson Cluster Arts event.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's a real event or not.
And we get so many things. I don't have
Is-
anything on the 10th.
what
Well,
is
the
that?
10th is my birthday. That's, oh, look at that.
Oh, happy birthday.
Look at Siri reminded me. It's a
Like it's
happy
your
birthday. Birthday's though.
I'm okay with the 10th if we can.
Yeah, I can.
I'm not gonna do it.
Are you gonna be at the Arts Cluster event? The cluster,
I know, we just had a meeting, Louis, that never even came up. Didn't we just say we had nothing going?
I know. I was just going through the calendars. We were all talking and I saw it on there. So I didn't know. It's got a point person on there.
I have a feeling it was probably reserved, but we had a cat meeting
Okay.
yesterday. Yesterday.
Yeah.
Cluster advisory
oh, the
team.
advisory.
And one of the things on there was planning something in the spring for a
Okay,
cluster
so let's do the
arts.
10th.
So I think we're probably good on the 10th.
Okay, so November 10th is 5:15, a good time on the 10th?
I mean, that's what your time is. 5:15, okay.
5:15, good? Monica Lewis?
I'll
Okay.
just shoot, so it's Monica,
Monica Lewis, Suzanne, Elena, and Dr.
No, she
King.
said Zoom, Louis.
and
Ideally.
who? Dr.
maybe.
Is he gonna mess with
Who's the
I'll-
mic? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Now I'm playing. I'm not bullying you tonight. Okay, you'll,
Awesome. All right, so we're work session for the GO team to discuss any, we're gonna call tweaks or minor updates to the strategic plan will be held on November 10th at 5:15 via Zoom. We will share that. If we think we're gonna have a quorum, we will,
Five is
I can
quorum.
buy
we'll
it.
post the meeting. We'll announce the meeting.
do you have a Zoom or do you want me to set it up?
I mean, I can set it up.
Okay, all right.
Just making a note that I'm supposed to send.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Dr. Dancer, for all of your work this evening, sharing information. Was that the last thing you needed to share before we move on to your next slide about graduation rates?
Done.
You're done?
Yep.
All right, let's talk graduation.
All right, so graduation rate was released, as you know. And as a district, this is available, by the way, I just pulled this from the district webpage. I have some APS graphs web pages. I just don't know if I have the approval to share them yet, because some data is, like the general rate has been shared, but I don't think everything, so I don't want to jump to it. In terms of like fifth year, subgroup breakdown, I don't want to do any of that yet. So I'll just go on what's publicly accessible. As a district, we're excited about the continued growth and almost catching the state. State was 84.1, we were 84. As far as Maynard Jackson, I think the easiest way to see that is comparing us to where this chart does a good job. Jackson High, we were at 88.7. We graduated more students than ever before, 314 compared to 298 the year before. But percentage-wise, that was minus 1.1%. As I shared with our staff when I shared this, I've known that number pretty well. There are about I know the exact 4 students who we had projected to graduate in the summer, who just did not follow. It just didn't happen. They made a good effort. We're on track for 5th year, but didn't make it in 4 year. Had we would have basically matched where we were last year. But what I'm proud of is that we maintained after we had a 7.6% jump from the year before, and a slight decrease, but we're still in that upper 80s and we're on that precipice. And again, graduating more students. You can see where we stand. Some other schools dropped a little bit as well. There were some with some real big gains, which we're excited for them, including we share an associate superintendent, the Jackson and Mays clusters. So our partner cluster in Mays had a big jump of 13 points from where they were previously.
What's Hank Aaron? Is that like
Who? Hank
Hank
Aaron.
Aaron?
Hank Aaron is the alternative.
Oh, okay.
It used to be Forest Hill. Now it's
I
Hank
got
Aaron.
you.
So that's where we're at.
That's Famous Academy and all these kids who graduate with that.
So CSK, one thing I will say, when you look at some of these schools, these are much smaller graduating classes. CSK, Drew, Best, Classical, Collegiate, obviously charters, Carver Early, and then, North Atlanta, Jackson and Midtown, we have North Atlanta is larger, but Jackson and Midtown, we have similar graduating class sizes. Midtown's still slightly larger than us, but not that much in terms. So I've always said that last year and this year to some extent is going to be the challenging year because the impacts of the pandemic. It was the kids who lost credits when they were freshman, sophomore, juniors, when they weren't in school, was going to catch up. There was a lot of grace coming back into the pandemic that helped our class of 2021. And there's still grace in amazing amounts of work that our teachers put in with our students. But there were definitely some gaps, and we're working. I'm worried about class of 2023. And it's not necessarily just like what's happened this year or last year. It's that they're still fighting credits because they didn't finish classes in some regards back in that year we were off. And so it's a constant battle until we get caught back up. But the work is happening. I think we'll see some good things. What we're also really trying to chase, which will help. As I shared, the kids that are in the building, we do a good job at a high percentage graduating. Graduating rate is not based on who's in the building. Graduation rate is based on the kids in our cohort. So if a child leaves us and never goes into another school, they count against us. Even if they were with us one day in their 9th grade year and left, they count in our cohort if they never go as a dropout, if they never go back to school. So trying to track down some children who we lost in their sophomore year for our current seniors is challenging because there were some kids who just stopped going to school and we're trying to find them. Same thing last year. So that's the challenge there, but I'm proud of the work we did. We have a good team working on it. I'm also excited about some upcoming data points about 5th year and also some good data points about what we're doing with certain subgroups as well. In particular, our SWD subgroup. So, and
SWD.
graduating those students with disabilities, and the graduation rate with them. So, any questions?
Are these numbers you're proud of?
80, yes. I mean, I always want to go, you want to go up every year, but I just think like anything, when you have, I'm a believer in sustainability over time. It's that like progression line. If you're in math, it's not, you're going to have some years where you're here, some here, but are you heading in the right direction? When you look at our graduation rate, we're heading in the right direction from where we've been. And in particular, in the total numbers of students that were graduating. But, you know, I wish those 4 kids had made it. Sure. I see them sometimes and I said, why didn't you finish? So those are the types of things. I get it down. When I say I get the number, I become obsessive. I have a list. I have highlighting. I know everybody who's cleared and who hasn't cleared. It becomes an obsession. But at the end of the day, there's a child, and I know some of the stories about what the challenge was to finish. Those are the stories I can't share publicly, but I am proud of the work that we put in to get the kids there. And 314 students walked the stage either in May or in the summer, and many of them had quite the journey to get there, and we should all celebrate them. So. All right. Any chat? That's my principal report. Unless anybody needs more, I'm done.
All right. I think that is all we had. We did not do public comment at the beginning, so thank you, Dr. Dancer, for sharing insightful information and giving us some tasks and things to work on. But we did not have public comment earlier. It's very little public here, but if this is the time for you to share comments.
Nobody on chat.
All right, great. We'll move on to any announcements from anyone other than there's a college fair tonight going on. And
We have a dance Friday.
we have a homecoming dance on Friday.
We do. Finally,
Yay.
the homecoming part 3. So
Homecoming that never ends.
yes. And then Lewis, anything major from Kat that we need to share or you need to share?
I thought that was a very productive meeting, which isn't always the case, I can say for Kat. We were doing basically the same kind of thing where we've taken our priorities that we put together and now we're putting steps to those priorities. And hopefully next month we will have that finalized and we should be able to report on that.
We have a special ed cluster night, and I was trying to find a date for it. It would be October 26th, held at King. It is for special ed, Department of Special Ed is hosting it for the Jackson cluster.
What's the date for it?
October 26th.
Thank you.
Anything else? No? Okay, so we have a work session coming, and then our next meeting is scheduled for November 15th at 5:15. That is all we have on our agenda this evening. I'm not smiling. That's all we have on our agenda this evening. So we have reached the end of our agenda. Is there any additional business at this time?
You did a great job.
Reading the script, I think we will. Okay, so may I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. A second.
Second.
Second. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Abstentions. All right, thank you so much. Meeting adjourned at 6:42 p.m.
The recording has stopped.
There you go. Just in case you were wondering. Thank you all. I'm going to end it. Have a great night.
Have a good one too.